Okay, so I know the world we're living in, there's a whole lot of crazy out there. So let me just say straight off the bat, I'm not one of those people who thinks there's aliens or any of that nonsense. I like to keep my feet on the ground. None of that woo-woo stuff. If they were out there on their alien planet or something just bopping around, we'd have known about it by now, right? They would have dropped by, made a phone call, stopped by for dinner maybe, or left us a note. But what happened to me after the drones started showing up was unusual. So, here goes. It had been a few years, but I was still missing my wife. Man, I wish you could have met her. Everything about her was like a dream, you know? She was like nothing on this earth. She died in a car crash, a drunk driver going the wrong way on the freeway, and after that, nothing felt right anymore. Everything reminded me of her, and the feeling never went away. I needed to clean the slate, make a new start. So I sold the house we had lived in together and bought a smaller place in a new town. I guess I thought a change of scenery might help, but the truth is, grief doesn't care about where you are. It follows you. It lingers in the corners of empty rooms. I'm not trying to be melodramatic or anything, but it's the God's honest truth. It haunts your thoughts day and night, and sometimes it feels like it's never going to let go. Sometimes I thought I felt her presence. There was this one time when I was alone in the house and I was sure I smelled her perfume. But I realized all that was just the product of a grieving heart. Then one night I heard something, just a low hum. But it was strange. I know now that it was, the beginning of everything. At first, I didn't think much of the hum. We live in a noisy world, right? There's all kind of stuff we gotta deal with. But this eventually began to make a pretty strong impact, and I couldn't shake it. It was a dull, mechanical hum from overhead, distant. It would come and go. When it started at first, you could barely hear it, but it grew louder with time. It was there some mornings when I was getting ready for work for a moment or two, but it was at its worst when the sun went down. Late at night, the hum would intensify, and I don't know, it just made me jittery, anxious to tell you the truth. It was a sound that made me feel like something was out there, watching and waiting. I assumed it was low-flying aircraft, maybe some kind of military exercise, which would have been weird because we're not in a flight path. And I'd never seen any military planes doing any type of exercise overhead in the past. Granted, I hadn't lived here very long, but still. So the whole thing was difficult to unravel. But then I got a visual. And boy, it was really something. I saw them, drones, hovering above the neighborhood, shifting in silent, calculated formations. And they weren't just passing by, they were watching, observing. And they weren't quiet anymore. This was more than just a hum. They were loud, not just to me, but to everyone in town. The noise became a daily disturbance, a constant presence above our heads. People started to complain, first in hushed conversations at the grocery store. Then the concerns grew louder, more urgent at town meetings. People were fearful, worried. The city council wasn't much help. Officials assured us there was no cause for alarm, but no one seemed to know where the drones came from, or who was controlling them. They gave us some answers, but none of it made any sense. And it wasn't just happening in our town. Oh no, the reports spread. Other towns, other states. You've probably heard about it, right? The same eerie, unexplained surveillance. The same empty reassurances from those in charge. My neighbor John, I guess you could say he's got a colorful imagination. A very, unique way of looking at the world. He's always got these weird theories about things. Like I said, he's got quite the imagination. He's a nice enough guy, I guess, but he's always made me feel a little bit uncomfortable with all his crazy stories. So I've always just tried to avoid him. John and his wife have invited me over to dinner, but I've always made an excuse. Gotta work late. Think I might be coming down with the flu. I ran into John outside when I was picking up a package, and he said he's pretty sure that the drones are aliens. Classic John. And it was like he was excited or something, like he was a kid who was expecting a visit from Santa Claus. It was odd, to say the least. I didn't want to rain on his parade or anything, but I felt I had to tell him the truth. I told him that I saw a clip on the news that said the drones were just drones. There was definitely some mystery about who was operating them, and the stories regarding that didn't add up. But I told him there was one part of this whole mystery that was very clear. The things that we were all seeing, the things that were making a racket and keeping us up at night, they were drones. End of story. And I said, I didn't believe in aliens, but if I did, the fact is that every alien encounter story I've ever heard involved silent spaceships. You don't need a loud-ass engine making a racket if you're an alien with advanced technology. John looked stumped, like he was taking all that under consideration. The drones kept coming night after night, their presence growing more ominous with each passing day. And the town's unease turned into a palpable fear, a fear that something far more sinister was at play. Then one night something strange happened. I was sitting on the couch watching TV, a bag of chips in my lap, just trying to unwind. The screen flickered, which was weird, then static. I have streaming services, and usually if the connection drops, the app just buffers or closes. But this was old-school analog static, the kind you don't see anymore. It sent a weird shiver up my spine, but I shrugged it off. It was late anyway, so I turned off the TV and went to bed. As I lay there staring at the ceiling, I heard them again. The drones. But this time, the sound was different, louder, more invasive. It wasn't just noise, it was something else, something deeper. It was like the sound was burrowing into my brain, like it was carrying a message I couldn't understand. Message? That thought sounded like crazy talk, so I tried to block it out. I pressed a pillow over my ears, but it didn't help. I could still hear it. And then I saw a shadow outside my window. My heart raced. What was it? Who was it? I gathered the courage to peek through the curtains, but there was nothing. Just an empty street. I lay back down, but sleep was way out of reach. The drones, the static, the shadow, they were all messing with my head. And then, I don't know if what happened next was a dream or something else. I mean, I tell myself it was a dream, but I was in bed, my body heavy with exhaustion. I felt really tired for some reason. The kind of tired when your limbs are like lead, and they just sink into the mattress, and you couldn't move them even if you tried. And then I saw someone standing in my doorway. It was my wife. She looked just as she had on the day we got married. Radiant, full of life. A wave of emotion crashed over me, and for the first time in years I felt peace. But then I saw that she wasn't alone. I mean, given what happened next, I definitely wish she had been alone, but she wasn't. Two figures stood beside her. They were tall, gaunt, with elongated limbs and massive, unblinking eyes. Their skin was gray and smooth, almost translucent. I was happy to see my wife, but I wasn't too crazy about her companions. The sight of them filled me with terror. I wanted to move, to run, to get the hell out of there, but I couldn't. I was frozen, locked in place. Before I could react, they were beside me, their long fingers pressing against my arms, my chest, my forehead. It was gentle. Well, it was gentle at first. It was like they were searching for something, collecting something from me with their touch. And holy moly, they weren't shy about where they were touching. I mean, buy me a drink first, why don't you? And through it all, my wife smiled, like she was trying to soothe my anxieties, calm me down, and I was getting pretty anxious. "Just keep looking at me, baby," she whispered. "It'll be over soon." Her voice was like a smooth summer breeze. I wanted to trust her. I wanted to believe. So I did what she said. I focused on her face, on that gentle, familiar smile. I've always loved her smile, and for a moment, I felt safe. Then something changed. Their hands weren't just touching me anymore, they were prodding, jabbing deep into my skin. They probed, pressing into places they shouldn't, places that made me feel exposed, vulnerable. There was pain, sharp and cold, terror mounted. Suddenly I felt like I wanted to scream, and I had never screamed before as a grown man. It felt like someone was gripping my throat, squeezing. I wasn't sure if they were actually doing that or if it was just the panic taking over me. My wife's voice cut through the horror, soothing and reassuring. "Just look at me, baby." And so I tried to focus on her. I tried to drink in every line of her face, the sound of her voice. I tried to make the most of this time we had together. Seconds passed, maybe hours, I don't know. Time felt strange, stretched and compacted all at once. Then a bright light flooded the room, white hot, blinding, streaming in through the window. I turned to look, just for a second, and it flashed, then disappeared. And just like that, they were gone. I gasped for breath, my heart pounding in my chest. The room was empty, but the terror lingered. I looked around frantically, trying to make sense of what had just happened. My heart was still racing, and I could feel the sweat dripping down my face. The bed beneath me looked like a puddle, sweat everywhere. I stared at the doorway where my wife had stood, and a chill ran down my spine. No wife, no creatures, no sound. Just me, lying in my bed, drenched in sweat, my heart pounding in my chest. Ba-dum, ba-dum, ba-dum. The next thing I remember was waking up the next morning. Sunlight streamed through my window, and everything was exactly as I had left it. It looked like any other day, except it kinda wasn't. But despite my sense of unease, there were no signs of anything unusual, no proof that anything had happened at all. I was a little bit sore in certain places, the places that had been probed and prodded, but that could have just been my imagination, right? My mind trying to give some context to a very vivid dream. So, yeah, like I said, I'm pretty sure it was just a dream, or a nightmare, or a weird mixture of both. I don't believe in aliens, or ghosts for that matter. But later that afternoon, as I was outside weeding my yard, my neighbor John drove by. He slowed, rolled down his window and waved. "Dinner invitation's still open," he said with a grin. "Marcy and I would love to have you over." "Weird things have been happening around here lately," he said. "Might be good to talk." I hesitated. Like I said earlier, I'd always thought John was a little off. But maybe he wasn't quite the nut job I'd made him out to be. This time, I accepted his dinner invitation. Who knows? Like I said, I'm 100% sure it was a dream. But I guess it wouldn't hurt to talk.